My husband's sister showed up at our wedding. She was actually his secret daughter. Just as I was about to say I do, a teenage girl crashed my wedding with a secret that would shatter my perfect fairy tale into a million pieces. My name is Jessica, and I was 28 years old on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the bridal suite, casting golden rays on my white dress hanging by the window. I had spent months planning every detail of this wedding with meticulous precision. The venue was a picturesque garden estate with rolling hills and a crystal-clear lake. 200 guests were seated on white chairs arranged in perfect rows, facing an arch adorned with peonies and roses, my favorite flowers. Michael, my fiancé, and I had been together for 3 years before he proposed on a beach during sunset. He was everything I had ever dreamed of in a partner, kind, ambitious, handsome, and deeply devoted to me. Our relationship had been smooth sailing from the beginning, with none of the drama or uncertainty that plagued many of my friends' romances. He was a successful architect, and I worked as a marketing director. We had bought a house together 6 months before the wedding, a beautiful colonial with a garden where I planned to grow vegetables and flowers. As my bridesmaids helped me into my dress, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Can't wait to see you walk down the aisle. You're going to be the most beautiful bride in the world." I smiled, my heart swelling with love and anticipation. My mother adjusted my veil, tears welling in her eyes. "You look absolutely stunning, sweetheart. Your father would have been so proud to see you today." I blinked back tears, thinking of my father, who had passed away 5 years ago. The wedding planner knocked on the door. "It's time, Jessica." My bridesmaids formed a circle around me, and we shared a moment of silence and gratitude. As I walked toward the garden, my heart beat faster with each step. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon in D, and I saw Michael waiting for me at the end of the aisle, his eyes locked on mine. He looked incredibly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile radiating pure joy. Our guests rose and turned to watch me approach. I saw my mother in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Michael's parents sat beside her, beaming with pride. Everything was perfect, exactly as I had imagined it would be since I was a little girl dreaming of my wedding day. When I reached Michael, he took my hands in his touch warm and reassuring. The officiant began the ceremony, speaking about love, commitment, and the journey that lay ahead of us. I barely heard the words, lost in Michael's eyes, lost in the magic of the moment. We had written our own vows, and when it was time to recite them, Michael's voice was steady and sincere. "Jessica, from the moment I met you, I knew you were the one I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. You've brought more joy and light into my life than I ever thought possible. I promise to cherish you, support you, and love you unconditionally for all the days of my life." Tears streamed down my face as I repeated my own vows to him, promising to stand by his side through whatever challenges and triumphs life might bring. The officiant smiled at us both. "And now, if there is anyone present who believes these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." A moment of silence hung in the air, as customary at this point in the ceremony. I squeezed Michael's hand, ready to finally be pronounced as his wife. But then, a voice broke through the peaceful afternoon. "I have something to say." All heads turned toward the back of the seating area where a teenage girl stood, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, with long dark hair that cascaded over her shoulders and intense brown eyes that were fixed on Michael. She wore a simple summer dress that seemed out of place among the formal attire of the guests. The wedding coordinator rushed toward her, but the girl held up her hand. "I need to speak to Michael. It's important." Her voice carried across the garden, clear and unwavering despite the hundreds of eyes now trained on her. Michael's face had gone pale, his grip on my hand suddenly tight. "I don't know who this is," he whispered to me, though his eyes told a different story. There was recognition there, mixed with panic. The girl began walking down the aisle, her steps deliberate. Guests murmured to each other, confusion rippling through the rows. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sense of dread washing over me. This wasn't a planned part of the ceremony. This wasn't a joke. This was something real and something threatening to shatter my perfect day. When she reached the front, she stopped a few feet from us, her gaze never leaving Michael. "You told me you couldn't make it to my graduation because you had an important work conference," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But you're here, getting married." Michael's composure was cracking. "This isn't the time or place," he said through gritted teeth. The girl laughed, a harsh sound that seemed out of place in the serene garden setting. "When would be the right time, Dad? When would you have told your new wife about me?" The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Dad. My mind struggled to process what she was implying. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not to us. "My name is Lily," she continued, turning to face the bewildered guests. "And Michael here is my biological father. He's been my uncle for my entire life, visiting me occasionally, but never acknowledging me as his daughter." I felt the blood drain from my face. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Michael had never mentioned having a child. He had told me he was an only child, that his parents had struggled with fertility before adopting him. This entire foundation of our relationship, built on honesty and trust, was crumbling before my eyes. The officiant looked from me to Michael to the girl, clearly at a loss for how to proceed. "Perhaps we should take a moment to—" "No," I interrupted, my voice barely audible. "I need to understand what's happening." Michael finally turned to face me, his expression a mixture of guilt and desperation. "Jessica, I can explain. It's not what it looks like." Lily scoffed. "Isn't it? You've been lying to her for your entire relationship, just like you've been lying to me my whole life." The garden was silent now, all eyes on this unfolding drama. My bridesmaids stood frozen at the front, their bouquets clutched tightly in their hands. My mother was making her way toward me, her face etched with concern. I looked at Michael, really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time. The man I loved, the man I was about to marry, was a stranger to me in that moment. How could he have kept something so monumental from me? How could he have a child he never mentioned? "Michael," I said, my voice shaking, "is this true? Is she your daughter?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Yes," he finally admitted, the word barely audible. "But it's complicated." The guests began murmuring again, some standing up, some recording with their phones. My perfect wedding had become a spectacle, a cautionary tale about secrets and lies. Lily stepped closer, her expression softening slightly as she looked at me. "I'm sorry to ruin your wedding, I really am, but I've spent my life being a secret. And I'm done with that. My mom died last year, and Michael was all I had left. But then he told me he was getting married, and I realized I would never be acknowledged as his daughter." My mind was reeling, trying to piece together the timeline. Michael and I had been together for 3 years, but we had known each other for 5 before we started dating. Had this happened during that time, or before? The wedding coordinator finally reached the front. "We need to handle this privately," she said firmly. "Let's move inside." As if in a trance, I allowed myself to be led away from the altar, away from the curious eyes of our guests, away from the wedding that was falling apart around me. Michael followed, Lily trailing behind him. My mother took my arm, her touch grounding me as we walked toward the estate house. Once inside a private sitting room, the reality of the situation began to sink in. My wedding dress felt like a costume for a play I no longer wanted to be in. The carefully applied makeup on my face felt like a mask, hiding the devastation underneath. The sitting room was elegantly furnished with plush sofas and antique chairs, but I barely noticed the decor. All I could focus on was the bombshell that had just been dropped in the middle of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My mother guided me to a sofa, her arm wrapped protectively around my shoulders. Michael stood awkwardly near the fireplace, while Lily perched on the edge of a chair across from me. The silence in the room was thick with unspoken questions and accusations. I could hear muffled sounds from outside as the wedding coordinator presumably tried to manage the confused guests. I think you owe everyone here an explanation, I finally said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor I felt inside. Michael ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it in a way I had never seen before. Jessica, I never meant for this to happen. I was going to tell you, I swear. When? I asked, my voice rising. When would have been the right time? After we were married? After we had children of our own? He flinched at my words, guilt written all over his face. Before the wedding, I was going to tell you tonight after everything was over. Lily snorted. That's what you told me last month when I asked if you were going to tell her about me. I'll handle it, you said, but you never did. I looked from Michael to Lily, trying to connect the dots. How old are you, Lily? 16, she replied. I'll be 17 next month. My mind raced with calculations. If Lily was 16, that meant Michael would have been around 22 when she was born. He and I had met when he was 26, so it was entirely possible that he had known about her throughout our entire relationship. Who's your mother? I asked, dreading the answer but needing to know. Her name was Rachel, Lily said quietly. She died of cancer last year. Michael flinched at the mention of Rachel's name. Rachel and I dated in college, he explained. We broke up before she knew she was pregnant. By the time she found out, I was already dating someone else, and she didn't want to complicate things. I stared at him in disbelief. She didn't tell you that you were going to have a child? She did, he admitted, but I was young and stupid. I asked her not to put my name on the birth certificate. I offered to pay child support, but I asked her to keep it private. The words hung in the air between us, each one another crack in the foundation of our relationship. The man I loved had abandoned his child, had chosen to keep her a secret rather than face the consequences of his actions. So for 16 years, you've been her uncle? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He nodded miserably. I visited a few times a year. I sent money. I kept in touch, but I never acknowledged her as his daughter in public. And why not? I demanded. Why would you hide your own child? Michael's eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. I was ashamed. I was worried about what people would think. By the time I met you, it had gone on for so long that I didn't know how to change it. Lily spoke up, her voice filled with hurt. He promised me that after I turned 18, we could tell people the truth, that we could have a real father-daughter relationship. But then he met you, and everything changed. I looked at this girl, this child, who had been kept in the shadows for her entire life, and my heart broke for her. At the same time, I felt a wave of anger toward Michael for putting both of us in this position. You've been lying to me for 3 years, I said to Michael. 3 years of conversations about our future, about children, about family, and never once did you mention that you already had a child. I know, he said, his voice cracking. I know I messed up, but I love you, Jessica. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with me while keeping a significant part of his past and present hidden from me. My mother, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Michael, I think you need to give Jessica some space. This is a lot to process. He looked at me pleadingly. Please don't make a decision today. Our wedding doesn't have to be ruined. We can still get married, and we can figure out how to incorporate Lily into our lives. I stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time. This wasn't the man I thought I was marrying. This was someone who could hide something monumental for years. Someone who could abandon his own child. Someone who could stand at the altar with me while knowing this secret was waiting to explode. I can't marry you today, I said, the words feeling both foreign and necessary. I can't marry you until I've had time to process this, to understand what this means for us. Lily stood up. I should go. I'm sorry for crashing your wedding, but I couldn't keep quiet anymore. As she walked toward the door, Michael called out to her. Lily, wait. He turned to me. Can we please talk, just the two of us? I shook my head. Not right now. I need time. The wedding coordinator knocked on the door. Jessica, what should I tell the guests? About the reception? I looked down at my wedding dress, at the diamond ring on my finger, at the life that was supposed to begin today but was now uncertain. Tell them the wedding is postponed. The word postponed echoed in my mind as I sat alone in the bridal suite, my wedding dress feeling like a costume for a play that had been abruptly canceled. Through the window, I could see guests slowly dispersing, their expressions a mixture of confusion and pity. Some were shaking their heads, others were consoling each other. My perfect day had devolved into gossip fodder, a dramatic story they would retell for years to come. My mother had helped me out of the wedding dress and into a simple robe, her hands gentle but her expression troubled. She had wanted to stay with me, but I insisted on being alone for a while. I needed to process everything without the influence of others, even those with my best interests at heart. The suite was filled with remnants of the morning's excitement, half-empty champagne glasses, makeup scattered across the vanity, my bouquet wilting on a table. Each item was a reminder of what should have been, of the future I had envisioned with Michael. How could I have been so blind, so naive? My mind replayed the last 3 years of our relationship, searching for clues I might have missed. There were moments, now that I thought about it, that seemed odd in retrospect. The occasional business trip that seemed to last longer than necessary. The times he would step away to take private calls. The reluctance to talk much about his college years. At the time, I had dismissed these as normal quirks, but now they seemed like warning signs I had chosen to ignore. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. "Jessica, it's me, Michael." I considered not answering, pretending I wasn't there. But we needed to talk eventually, and postponing the inevitable wouldn't change anything. "Come in," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The door opened slowly, and Michael stepped inside, his tuxedo slightly rumpled, his face etched with exhaustion and regret. He looked like a different man from the one who had stood at the altar just hours ago, beaming with love and anticipation. "Can we talk?" he asked, standing awkwardly near the door, as if afraid to approach me. I nodded, patting the space beside me on the sofa. He crossed the room and sat, leaving a careful distance between us.
"I'm so sorry, Jessica," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you?" I asked, turning to face him. "Why would you keep something so important from me?" He sighed, running his hands through his already disheveled hair. "It started out as a mistake, a stupid decision made by a 22-year-old who was scared and selfish. Rachel told me she was pregnant right after we broke up. I was just starting my career, just getting my life together. The thought of being a father was terrifying." I listened, trying to reconcile this version of Michael with the responsible, mature man I thought I knew. "At first, I thought it would be temporary," he continued. "Rachel agreed not to put my name on the birth certificate. I paid child support, visited occasionally, but I wasn't really a father. I was more like an occasional uncle." "But that changed, didn't it?" I said softly. He nodded. "As Lily got older, I started feeling more guilty. She would look at me with these eyes that so resembled my own, and I would feel this overwhelming sense of shame. By the time I met you, the secret had been going on for so long that I didn't know how to stop it. When we started getting serious, when we talked about marriage, why didn't you tell me then?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you would leave me, afraid you would see me as a terrible person. I loved you so much, and the thought of losing you was unbearable. I told myself that I would tell you eventually, that I just needed the right time." "And when was the right time going to be?" I challenged. "After we were married? After we had built a life on a foundation of lies?" "I was going to tell you tonight," he insisted. "I swear. I had it all planned out. I was going to explain everything, ask for your forgiveness, and then we could figure out how to move forward together." I shook my head, unable to comprehend his reasoning. "You were willing to stand at the altar with me? To make vows of honesty and commitment while hiding this enormous part of your life? How could you do that, Michael?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I don't have a good answer. I was selfish, I was cowardly, I was so focused on not losing you that I didn't consider how much more I would hurt you by keeping this secret. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his confession hanging between us. The man I loved was a stranger to me now, someone capable of deception on a scale I had never imagined. What happens now? I asked, more to myself than to him. We can still get married, he said eagerly, leaning forward. We can postpone the wedding, take some time to process this, but we don't have to end everything. I love you, Jessica. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I looked at him, at the desperation in his eyes, and felt a confusing mix of emotions. There was still love there, beneath the hurt and anger. 3 years together couldn't be erased in an afternoon, no matter how devastating the revelation. I need time, I said finally. I can't make any decisions right now. My head is spinning and my heart is broken. He nodded reluctantly. I understand, but please don't shut me out completely. Let me prove to you that I can be honest, that I can be the man you thought I was. As he spoke, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced down to see a text from my sister. Call me when you can. The wedding guests are talking, and some are posting on social media.
The story is already getting out. My wedding, my private moment of joy and commitment, was now public entertainment. Strangers were discussing my relationship, my broken engagement, my heartbreak. The humiliation washed over me, hot and suffocating. Michael saw the expression on my face. What is it? Everyone knows, I said quietly. The story is already spreading. He swore under his breath. I'm so sorry, Jessica. I never wanted to expose you to this. But you did, I replied, my voice cold. You did this the moment you decided to keep secrets from me. The days following the wedding that wasn't were a blur of emotions and decisions. I stayed at my mother's house, unable to face the home Michael and I had shared. Every room held memories of our life together, memories now tainted by his deception. My wedding dress remained in its garment bag, a constant reminder of what should have been. The internet had exploded with our story. Someone, probably one of the 200 guests at our wedding, had recorded the confrontation, and it had gone viral overnight. Wedding crasher reveals groom's secret daughter, read the headlines. Comments ranged from sympathy for me to judgment about both Michael and Lily. I became an unwilling character in a drama that had captured the public's attention. My phone rang constantly with calls from friends, family, and even journalists. My sister acted as a gatekeeper, fielding inquiries and relaying only the most important messages to me. She had taken a leave from work to stay with me, her presence a comforting constant in my chaotic new reality. On the third day after the wedding, Michael's mother called. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice was strained but kind. Jessica, I am so sorry about what happened. I had no idea about Lily until that day at the wedding. I was surprised. You didn't know? No, she said firmly. Michael never told us. We adopted him when he was a baby, and he's always been so private about his life before college. We knew he dated a girl named Rachel, but he told us they broke up and lost touch. We had no idea there was a child. This revelation complicated my feelings about Michael. If his own parents didn't know, perhaps his secrecy wasn't as malicious as I had initially thought. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it added a layer of complexity to the situation. His father and I want to meet Lily, Michael's mother continued. We have a grandchild we never knew about. It's a lot to process, but she's family. I thought about Lily, about the life she had lived as a secret. Did she have grandparents who loved her, aunts and uncles? Or was her family limited to a mother who had passed away and a father who kept her hidden? Have you spoken to her? I asked. Yes, yesterday. She's living with her maternal aunt temporarily. She's a remarkable young woman, Jessica, resilient and articulate, despite everything she's been through. I felt a pang of guilt. In my own pain and shock, I hadn't really considered what Lily must be feeling. She had lost her mother, and in her grief, she had reached out to her father, only to be met with continued evasion. Her decision to crash the wedding, while dramatic and painful for me, had been an act of desperation. Does she blame me? I asked, the question surprising even myself. No, Michael's mother replied gently. She understands that you're as much a victim in this as she is. She feels guilty for ruining your wedding day. We ended the call with an agreement to talk again in a few days. After hanging up, I sat in silence, processing this new information. My anger at Michael was still there, but it was now mingled with a more nuanced understanding of the situation. That evening, my sister brought in a stack of mail that had accumulated at my house. Among the bills and junk mail was a letter addressed to me in handwriting I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it. "Dear Jessica," it began, "I'm sure you don't remember me. We met briefly at Michael's college graduation 7 years ago. I'm Rachel's best friend, and I was there when she told Michael she was pregnant. I'm writing to you now because I believe you deserve to know the truth about what happened." I leaned forward, my heart racing as I continued reading. Michael was terrified when Rachel told him she was pregnant. He had just landed a prestigious internship, and he was worried that having a child would derail his career. He begged Rachel not to tell anyone, not to put his name on the birth certificate. He promised he would be involved, but privately. The letter went on to describe how Michael had initially been present in Lily's life, visiting regularly and paying child support. But as his career advanced and he became more established in his social circle, his visits became less frequent. Rachel never wanted to be the kind of person who used a child to trap a man, the letter continued. She respected Michael's wishes for privacy, even when it broke her heart to see Lily asking why her uncle, Michael, couldn't come to her school events or birthday parties. As I read, pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. Michael wasn't just hiding his daughter from me, he had been hiding her from his entire life, compartmentalizing this part of his existence so completely that it barely touched his day-to-day reality. The last time I saw Michael was at Rachel's funeral last year, the letter concluded. He came alone, stayed in the back, and left before most people knew he was there. Lily saw him, though. After the service, she asked him if now that her mom was gone, he could finally be her father in public. He told her he needed time, that he was in a serious relationship and didn't know how to integrate this new reality. I suppose we all know how that turned out. The letter was signed, "A friend who believes the truth matters more than comfort." I set the letter down, my hands shaking. This account painted a picture of Michael that was even more troubling than the one I had constructed in my mind. He hadn't just made a mistake as a young man and then been trapped by it. He had actively maintained this deception for years, choosing his comfort and reputation over his own child. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Can we please talk? I need to explain everything." I typed back a response. "I know more than you think I do. We need to talk, but not today." As I sent the message, I realized that my decision about our relationship wasn't just about whether I could forgive Michael's deception. It was about whether I could build a life with someone capable of such profound selfishness. The answer, I feared, was becoming increasingly clear. A week after the wedding that wasn't, I agreed to meet Michael at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop far from places we frequented together. I wore sunglasses and a hat, hoping to avoid recognition. Our story was still making the rounds on social media, and I had no desire to become a public spectacle. Michael was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that seemed to hang loosely on his frame. The confident, put-together man I had fallen in love with was nowhere in sight. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as I sat down, pushing one of the coffee cups toward me. "I've been worried about you." "I've been processing," I replied, my voice neutral, "and I've been learning more about your life with Lily." He flinched at the mention of her name. "I figured you might have talked to someone. Rachel had friends who weren't exactly fans of mine." I slid the letter I had received across the table. "I received this a few days ago. It filled in some gaps for me." As he read, his face grew paler. When he finished, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with shame. I'm not going to defend my actions, Jessica. There's no justification for what I did. Then help me understand, I said, my voice softening slightly. Help me understand how the man I fell in love with could keep his own child a secret for 16 years. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. It started out as fear of derailing my career, fear of being a young father, fear of not being good enough. But over time, it became something else. It became about maintaining an image, about compartmentalizing my life so thoroughly that the different parts never touched. He paused, stirring his coffee, though he hadn't taken a sip. Every time I visited Lily, I would feel this overwhelming guilt. And the guilt made me want to avoid the next visit, which made me feel even more guilty. It was a cycle I couldn't break. What changed? I asked. Why were you going to tell me the night of our wedding? He looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. Lily's mother died last year, and after the funeral, Lily asked me if she could finally be my daughter in public. She was 15. Dealing with the loss of her mother and asking for the one thing I had never been able to give her, a father who acknowledged her openly. He took a sip of coffee, his hand trembling slightly. I told her I needed time, that I was in a serious relationship and didn't know how to integrate this new reality. She was disappointed, but she understood. Or so I thought. But she didn't understand, I finished for him. He shook his head. Over the past few months, she became more insistent. She wanted to meet you. She wanted to be included in our wedding plans. She was tired of being a secret, and frankly, so was I. So why didn't you tell me earlier? I asked, the hurt still fresh in my voice. Because I'm a coward, he admitted bluntly. I was afraid of your reaction, afraid you would see me differently, afraid you would leave me. Every time I worked up the courage to tell you, I would chicken out at the last minute. I thought about the months leading up to the wedding, the stress, the arguments over small details, the tension that had seemed to come from nowhere. Now it all made sense. Michael hadn't just been stressed about wedding planning. He had been carrying the weight of this enormous secret. Did you ever love me? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since that day. Or was I just part of the perfect life you were trying to build? I loved you more than I've ever loved anyone, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. That's what makes this so painful. I wasn't using you to build a perfect life. I was genuinely, deeply in love with you, and that love made me even more terrified of losing you. As he spoke, I felt the conflicting emotions that had been churning inside me begin to settle. There was still anger and hurt, but beneath it all was the love I had felt for him for 3 years. Love doesn't just disappear, even in the face of betrayal. What happens now? I asked, echoing the question I had asked in the bridal suite that day. He reached across the table, his hand hovering over mine before pulling back. I'm in therapy, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. I've been spending time with Lily, getting to know her as my daughter rather than my secret. Her aunt has been wonderful, helping us navigate this new relationship. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm hoping for a chance to earn it. I want to be the man you thought I was, the man I should have been all along. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the man who had deceived me, but also the man who was trying to make things right. The path forward wasn't clear, but for the first time since the wedding, I could see that there might be a path at all. I can't make any promises, I said slowly, but I'm willing to talk about what comes next, not as a bride and groom, but as two people trying to figure out if their relationship can survive something like this. A flicker of hope appeared in his eyes. That's more than I deserve. We need to be honest with each other, I continued, completely honest. No more secrets, no more half-truths. If we're going to move forward, it has to be with full transparency. He nodded eagerly. Anything. I'll tell you anything you want to know. And Lily, I added, she needs to be part of this conversation, not just your secret daughter, but as someone whose life has been profoundly affected by your choices. He agreed, though I could see the apprehension in his expression. Including Lily in our discussions would make everything more real, more complicated, but it was necessary. She was no longer a secret to be managed, but a person to be acknowledged. As we left the coffee shop, I felt a glimmer of something that had been absent since the wedding. Hope. Not the naive hope of a bride-to-be, but the cautious hope of someone considering whether a broken relationship could be mended. 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, I sat across from Lily at a small cafe in her neighborhood. The first few weeks after our confrontation had been a whirlwind of emotions and decisions.
Michael and I had attended counseling sessions together and separately. We had long, difficult conversations about trust, honesty, and the possibility of a future together. And slowly, carefully, we had begun to build a new kind of relationship, one that included Lily. "I never thanked you for not hating me," Lily said, breaking the silence that had settled between us. "Most people in your position would have wanted nothing to do with me." I considered her words, thinking back to those initial days of shock and anger. "You were as much a victim in this as I was. Your father made choices that affected both of our lives profoundly. Blaming you would have been easier than facing the complicated truth." She nodded, stirring her iced tea. "He's trying, being a father, I mean. It's awkward sometimes, like we're strangers trying to learn how to be family." "I imagine it's difficult for both of you," I replied gently. "You're both learning to navigate a relationship that should have been normal from the beginning." Lily had grown more comfortable with me over the weeks of our occasional meetings. Initially, our conversations had been stilted and formal, but gradually we had found a rhythm. She was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that reminded me of Michael. "Are you two going to get back together?" she asked, the question she had been circling for weeks. I took a deep breath, considering how to answer. "Michael and I are working on rebuilding our relationship, but it's different now. The wedding, the engagement, it all represented a version of us that was built on incomplete information. We're starting over, in a way." She seemed relieved by my answer. "I would feel terrible if I was the reason you two didn't end up together." "You're not the reason, Lily," I said firmly. "You're the truth that was revealed. The reason would be Michael's choices and how we choose to move forward in light of those choices." As we spoke, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Done with my session. Want to meet for dinner?" I smiled slightly, typing back, "I'm with Lily. We could all meet if you'd like." His response came quickly. "I'd like that very much." When Michael arrived at the cafe half an hour later, there was a moment of hesitation as he approached our table. The dynamic between the three of us was still evolving, still finding its balance. But as he sat down and the conversation flowed, I felt something shift, something healing. We talked about mundane things: Lily's upcoming school year, Michael's latest project at work, the apartment I had moved into after leaving the house we had shared together. These ordinary conversations were the foundation of the new relationship we were building, one based on truth rather than illusion. After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Michael took my hand. "I know this isn't what you planned, but I'm grateful for this second chance." I looked from him to Lily, who was walking a few steps ahead, and felt a complex mix of emotions. There was still pain when I thought about the wedding day, about the public humiliation and private betrayal. But there was also something else, a recognition that sometimes the most painful truths lead to the most authentic relationships. "I'm still processing," I admitted. "Some days are harder than others, but I don't regret giving us a chance to figure this out." He squeezed my hand gently. "Whatever happens, I'm committed to being honest with you and to being a father to Lily. No more secrets." The road ahead was uncertain. We hadn't set a new wedding date, and we weren't sure if we would ever get married. But we were trying to build something real out of the wreckage of deception. 6 months later, Michael, Lily, and I stood in a small garden, not for a wedding, but for a commitment ceremony of a different kind. Michael had officially acknowledged Lily as his daughter, adding his name to her birth certificate 16 years after it was first issued. Her maternal aunt stood beside her, along with Michael's parents, who had embraced their granddaughter with open hearts. I stood beside Michael, not as his bride, but as his partner in this complicated journey of blended family. We hadn't planned a wedding, but we had planned a future, one that included honesty, challenges, and the three of us figuring it out together. As we celebrated afterward, I thought about that disastrous wedding day, about the teenage girl who had crashed my perfect ceremony and revealed an imperfect truth.
In that moment of humiliation and heartbreak, I couldn't have imagined that this broken beginning could lead to something more authentic, more real than the fairy tale I had envisioned. Life isn't perfect, and neither are the people we love. But sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones that emerge from broken places, rebuilt with stronger materials, truth, forgiveness, and the courage to face difficult realities together. My wedding day hadn't gone as planned, but the life that emerged from its ashes was richer, more complex, and ultimately more real than the perfect fairy tale I had once dreamed of. And as I looked at Michael and Lily laughing together in the afternoon sun, I knew that this imperfect family was exactly where I was meant to be.